What events would you have to see to feel confident that a market top is in?
I think we may actually be there, and here's what I've been watching for the last several months. Of course, the bounce off 875 when we had that last drawdown into that area was one where a lot of people did not believe that area was going to hold, including myself, and I got a little bit of damage from attempting to short into that. Took it off rather quickly, but nonetheless, that was an area that I didn't think would hold up. This time around, we've now got a very solid trend line that's been established. It's been valid since March. And we violated that in the Russell 2000 on Friday. We violated it in the NASDAQ. Well, we also violated it in the transports late last week as well. That was violated in the NASDAQ today. Okay, so of the primary indices that I watch, the S&P, the Dow, the NDX, the NASDAQ 100, the Russell 2000, and the transports, of those, we have only the Dow Jones Industrials and the S&P 500, and the S&P could be argued to have broken it today. It's basically sitting right on that trend line. So if we're going to get a bounce, and we're going to get another one of these ramp job kind of deals, it should essentially start now. If it does not, and we break that with some sort of conviction, there's a very high probability that the top is in.
Citibank's actions last week made you concerned that a credit pipeline cutoff might come with a rapid appreciation of the dollar in response. Was the recent greenback rally and the Euro Swan dive the beginning of this process?
Yeah, it is. Citibank's actions make absolutely no sense. Okay, neither do a lot of the other banks and the anecdotes that I'm hearing from other areas. It's not just Citibank. There are anecdotal reports coming into me all the time now of banks that are, with REO-owned properties, real estate that they've taken back from foreclosure, where they are taking cash deals where they have 2, 3, 4 conforming mortgage bids from people who are qualified, and yet they're rejecting that in favor of taking a cash offer on the same land right now for 30, 40% less. What a lot of people don't understand about this is that these banks, when they originate mortgages in this sort of an environment, they don't hold that paper. It immediately gets sold on to Fannie and Freddie. Or in the case of the FHA, it gets endorsed and put into the pools through Ginnie Mae. And as a result, there's no funding risk within the bank on that sort of transaction. They get paid just like they do on a cash close, exactly the same sort of fashion. So what this says to me is that there's an awful lot of people out there that believe that 2, 3, 4 weeks from now, the normal, 30-day time window to close a real estate transaction, this ordinary extension of credit from what we think of as a perfectly safe system isn't going to exist. And they want the money in cash right now. There isn't any other rational explanation for taking bids that are, 20, 30, 40% below what you could otherwise get. There's nothing else that makes sense there. Then you add to this rate jack stuff, which I've never seen any card company do before, taking both defaulted and non-defaulted rates to 30%, guarantees that anyone who can leave immediately will. So if you have somebody that has a balance on their card and they're able to transfer that balance to a low-cost institution, that is instantaneously going to happen. If you have someone who cannot transfer, it is because they have horrible credit. That person is very unlikely to pay. So my analysis of this is that Citibank has essentially chosen to take the risk of detonating their entire credit card portfolio and destroying their ability to be a credit card issuer in the future. Why would you do this? It makes absolutely no sense. It's one thing to do something like that to people who aren't paying on time or just lost their job or whatever have you. But I'm getting dozens of emails and faxes from people who assert that they have 800 FICO scores, have not lost their job, have a $4,000 or $5,000 balance on this card, and went from 13% to 30. It makes absolutely no sense. I have to believe that they see something coming, and it's this is all anecdotal at this point, but I'm looking at behavior. I don't care what people tell me. I look at what they do. And what I see here is people that are acting in a fashion that they believe that credit is just simply not going to be available, and they are in a mad dash for cash. They are trying to raise hard dollars right now through any means possible and do it in a way that hopefully doesn't spook the market. So it smells to me like they think something's coming.
If our government suddenly reversed course on many fronts, like mark-to-market and budget deficits, if they forced insolvent banks into liquidation and reversed easy money policies, what would the short-term economic landscape look like?
It would be very bad. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. There's no free lunch. Okay, the losses that are embedded in these portfolios have to be taken by somebody at some point. You can't get away from the fact that, what I like to say is when you make a bad loan, the loss happens at that time. We can argue over who eats it. We can argue over when you recognize it. But we can't change the fact that the loss has occurred. That's now history and is in the past. If we were to do that, the FDIC and the Treasury would need to redirect very significant amounts of money into making sure the depositors were covered, because if Granny gets screwed out of her $10,000, the shotguns will come out. All right, so that obviously cannot be allowed to happen. And we could do that. It would have been easier to do it a year ago or 2 years ago. We could still do it today, but it would mean that certainly the big four that are out there, that's the Citibank, Bank of America, maybe JP Morgan, probably Wells Fargo, all of those institutions would cease to exist. A substantial percentage of the large regional banks, places like Regions and stuff like that, would also go down. The real question that I have with regards to the behemoths, especially Wells and Citi, is both of those institutions have a tremendous amount of off-balance sheet exposure that has to come back in under the FAS rulings as of November 15th. And I don't know what's in those boxes. Okay, I don't even know precisely what the size of the box is. The reports on Citibank are anywhere between $800 billion and $1.3 trillion. Is there perfectly good as gold, short-term, borrowings of various kinds in their assets that there's no impairment on in those boxes? If so, everything's okay. If it's full of second mortgage, home equity line, subordinated tranches of some securitized garbage that was put together during the bubble, and oh, by the way, they're all out in California and the people stopped paying 6 months ago, they're worth nothing. And the idea of, $800 billion worth of zero showing up on someone's balance sheet ought to be enough to make anybody turn white. So, but the problem is we don't know what's in those things, and that's the whole problem with things being off balance sheet. You can't see them. I mean, that's how Enron blew up, and bringing that back onto the balance sheet, it has to happen. We need to clear that stuff out. We need to know what's going on in that regard. I met with some people today, and there was a securitization that was handed to me where the person who I met with, his mortgage is in that pool. He's being sued for foreclosure. He absolutely has defaulted. Okay. I mean, he legitimately hasn't paid them. And I dug around and managed to find this particular securitization and got a printout of the QSIPs and the information that's available on those securitizations, and they're showing zero cumulative loss. Is that because they're not publicly traded and we don't have an accurate number, or is that what somebody's trying to claim and it's not true? I don't know. But this is the kind of thing that the market right now doesn't have any visibility into. And this is one of the biggest issues I have with trying to analyze where the market is going to go and where the credit markets will go and where our economy will go, is that I can't get an honest accounting out of any of these institutions. It doesn't matter where I look. There's stuff like this that pops up in my face that doesn't make any sense. To assume that if there was nothing to hide that they wouldn't do it, okay? And so the assumption has to be that there's something they don't want you to know. You don't know what it is, but there's, if it's something as simple as we need to sell another $10 billion worth of stock and we don't want to do it, that may be all it is. But even that could produce a fairly nasty reaction in the market, because after the stress test, we were told everybody was okay. I thought they were a farce, okay, primarily because they didn't deal with any of the off-balance sheet trusts. And that, to me, is the 900-pound gorilla in the room, It's any time that you have secrecy and I can't see inside the